Awesome. So thank you for joining our conversation with Cathy Polinsky, former CTO of Stitch Fix. Would be great to tell you a little bit more about Pair and what we do. Obviously, we're an early stage VC fund. We like to say we help startups go from 0 to 1. And the way we define that is 0 is really just a team and a pitch deck. I mean, we like to say you're never too early to have a conversation with us. And 1 is startups go on to raise a Series A, ready to grow and scale. And then anywhere between 0 to 1 is our sweet spot. So if you're a founder or know any founders in the 0 to 1 phase, we'd love to have a conversation. In terms of our team, we think of ourselves as operators with a checkbook. So many of our partners have founded and sold companies to the likes of Facebook, Dropbox, Instacart, Cisco, Yahoo, you name it. And on the investing side, we've been lucky to partner early with some pretty amazing companies now worth over $40 billion. And to that point, here are just some of the companies we partnered with, like DoorDash, Affinity, Gusto, Garden Health, Branch Metrics, and SentiBio, and many more that we're not able to kind of list on this screen. But getting into, Pair Garage, we used to run this program exclusively for Stanford students, but given COVID and everyone going virtual, we thought, why don't we open this up to everyone and try to find really the top 25 entrepreneurial engineering students in the country. So what is Pair Garage? Essentially, we're trying to help students go from idea to MVP with a program that ultimately culminates in a pitch event to the Pair team. The best teams will earn a spot in our summer accelerator. But even backing up a step, kind of what does this program consist of? We talked to a lot of engineers in our network, and really what we heard is like, you guys just want the opportunity to meet and interact and socialize with other kind of like-minded, really brilliant engineers. So the first 3 months are going to be focused on that, getting to know everyone, maybe even finding a co-founder. From there, we'll help you with company building. So anything from office hours with Pair partners to founder circles with your peers, and then obviously culminate in a pitch and a graduation event. We also ask that you're available for at least 2 meetings per month, and hopefully, if all goes well, you'll be able to attend more of those. Who are you? Who are we looking for? We don't specifically say software engineer. We know a lot of people who build don't have the traditional CS background. So as long as you kind of identify as a hacker, creator, or builder, we'd love for you to apply. I also think it's important to note that you don't need a team, you don't need an idea, although it's okay if you have them. So don't feel pressured not to apply if you don't have one of those. We'd love to take a look at your application either way. We're looking for people with a growth mindset. We are limiting this to class of 2021 or 2022, although it is okay if you're taking a gap year or on a leave of absence. Here's some just great pictures of kind of what Pair Garage looked like in the past. Obviously, going fully virtual, it might look a little bit different this year, but we're really excited about the program and hope to replicate a lot of these events online. As you can see, we've had a lot of successful companies start from Pair Garage. So whether they're selling to big companies like Palantir or getting funded by amazing later stage VCs like 8VC, Venrock, Sequoia, and Lightspeed, a lot of successful entrepreneurs have gotten their start in Pair Garage. And even if you don't go on to start a company, a lot of our alumni have found success at early stage startups, great tech companies, even VCs themselves. So we're really proud of the alumni network we've built. All that being said, the application's 20 minutes. I wanted to point out that the deadline is coming up September 25th. Feel free to apply at the link below. And if you have any last minute questions, you can reach out to me at Harris, HARRIS @pair.vc. And I'm happy to get those answered before the deadline. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to introduce Cathy Polinsky, the former CTO of Stitch Fix. 1 second. Hi, Cathy. All right, so hi. Cathy is a technology executive with over 20 years of industry experience. She was most recently the Chief Technology Officer at Stitch Fix, an online personal styling service for women, men, and kids. Stitch Fix is well known for its data science and machine learning capabilities, as well as its innovative use of human and machines to help clients find what they love. She joined in 2016, right before the Stitch Fix IPO, and led engineering, product, and IT organizations through rapid growth. Prior to Stitch Fix, she led a variety of engineering organizations and initiatives at Salesforce for 7 years, including the launch of new high distributed large-scale enterprise search infrastructure in her role as SVP of engineering. She's also built robust large-scale systems and led engineering teams at industry powerhouses like Oracle, Yahoo, and Amazon, and even spent time at a 13-person early-stage business intelligence startup. She's currently an independent board director at a healthcare tech company that delivers real-world evidence to determine which treatments work best for whom and when. She's a graduate of Swarthmore College with a degree in computer science and is a member of the Swarthmore College Board of Managers. And with that, would love to just dive into the first question, Cathy, and ask you kind of what led to you majoring in computer science in college?
Thanks, Harris. Great to be here. And, I actually am really excited about the evolution of the garage program that you're doing. I've been to the offices and, just there's a lot of energy, but going to Swarthmore College where we didn't have the same opportunities, I imagine that there's a lot of folks like me out there that would love to have an opportunity like this, and so it's really great to see. I feel a little old by telling you my story of how I got into computer science. I used to feel like I was the young person in the room, and sometime in the last couple of years, I feel like I've switched over to being more of the tenured old person. But I started getting interested in computers when I was in elementary school. Very few people had personal computers then in the 80s. And my elementary school got a lab of Apple IIe's personal computers. And my mom was a teacher at the time and thought that it was interesting technology. And she got us a personal computer before we even had a VCR at home. If you know what a VCR is. And I really got hooked in it. I learned my first programming language was Logo, which was a precursor to Scratch, where there's a little triangle that you would make shapes on the screen. And it actually had functions and recursion. And then after that, I learned basic programming and was really hooked to it. When I got to middle school and high school, there was practically no computer science education. In fact, our high school got a grant for new computers, and they gave the new computers to the typing department instead of the computer science department because typing was a more important skill for everyone. And but I did get to go to a summer camp at Carnegie Mellon since I grew up in Pittsburgh, and it was run by a CS professor at CMU. It was called Andrew's Leap. We did algorithms in the morning and more hands-on programming in the afternoon with robotics and maze solving problems, and just really got hooked and knew I wanted to study it after high school.
Wow, that's like amazing thinking about how different it must have been then versus now. I feel like every kind of kid in middle school has an iPhone or a computer, and
yeah.
Crazy. Before diving into the next question, I just wanted to let all of our participants know, if you guys have questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A down below. I disabled the chat, but we'll be monitoring the Q&A, and at the end, we've saved some time to answer those questions as well. So diving into kind of the next question, which I'm really interested to hear about, is one of your first jobs out of school was actually as a software engineer at Amazon in 1999, kind of before the dot-com crash. What was that experience like, and could you ever have imagined how big the company would get?
Yeah. So I graduated in 99, went straight to Amazon. Amazon was growing like crazy, but still was in the hundreds of engineers at the time, not the thousands. I'd say that it was a bit chaotic. The amazing, brilliant engineers, but the code base was a mess. It took 8 hours to do a build. And there was no documentation. Things were just, really like it was just rapid pace. Everyone's going. And, when I was there was a meme. This is so long ago, but Amazon's navigation was all tab-based, not search-based. And so they kept adding a new tab for books and videos and electronics and kitchen and toys. And there were memes about like the whole page is going to be just tabs and tabs if Amazon didn't change their navigation structure. It was an amazing time where I learned how to be an engineer, and just being in a company that was scaling so fast, I learned a lot about like how to hire people earlier than any other job I would have gotten. I went and did the year after I graduated, I went and did a college scouting trip to the East Coast and went to schools and like interviewed dozens of college students and learned about unit testing and automation frameworks when a lot of my friends who had graduated were not working and kind of as robust of a system. Did I know it was going to be that big? Like while I was there, I thought I'd miss the interesting times at Amazon. Like I thought I'd miss the early stage startup and that it wasn't not that I didn't think it was going to grow, but that I'd miss the interesting times. Little did I know I was living the interesting times. Like it was a gritty time. I was there during the .com collapse, and all my stock was underwater. And when I was there, though, Jeff Bezos, not that I was in the room with him, although I could hear his laugh down the hall. I heard he was frustrated because he couldn't come up with a 10-year plan for how he would be larger than Walmart.
Oh, gosh.
So, just the sense though, is like he had ambitions, from the early days that he wasn't going to be a bookseller, that Amazon was going to be much bigger than it was. I don't think there were any ambitions to be AWS or to extend as much and as far as it has. But, Amazon always was reaching far, and you knew that they were going to be successful. And it, wasn't just, a bookseller, even from the early days.
Wow, that's amazing context to have. I'm actually curious. In early days of Amazon, you hear that Jeff Bezos was very frugal, was one of his big kind of business mindsets. Like, how did you see that play out? I mean, I heard they would even have teams go to Home Depot and build their own desks.
Door desks. I had a door desk when I started, just a bunch of 2x4s and a door. And actually when my friend who started a year before me, she built her own door desk. But by the time I started, it was more cost efficient for them not to have the employees build it. And so we didn't build it. Very, very frugal. Although I was there when they made a bunch of penny wise, pound foolish decisions, and there were no free snacks. There were vending machines for soda. It was not a Silicon Valley tech company by any stretch of the imagination. Jeff was like, we're not going to have these perks until we're profitable, and just kind of wasn't ostentatious about his own spending habits in a way that, you made it feel like he was an owner and that he was doing the same things that he cared about. They did bring in an executive while I was there who was, I would say, organ rejected. He, while I was there, I remember him deciding to get rid of the Advil in the supply closet as a cost-saving measure. And as a engineer, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why would you possibly do this? This is not cost-effective. There were I think that went even further than Jeff would have gone on his own. And, they did bring it back after a lot of complaints.
Those are some amazing early stories that not everyone gets to hear. So thank you for sharing. Post Amazon, could you walk us through your career journey and kind of how you took the ladder from software engineer to obviously most recently CTO of Stitch Fix?
So I thought I'd miss the interesting times of an early stage startup when I was at Amazon. And so I wanted to see the startup world. And I left Amazon to join some friends down here in San Mateo for a 13-person startup. It was amazing. I wrote a ton of code, built great products. But the company never really got off the ground. We only had 2 pilot customers, really couldn't get sales. There was a recession going on, but it was heartbreaking when we closed the door, to feel like I put so much of my blood, sweat, and tears into, building something that I was really proud of. And yet it not really getting product market fit and not really getting traction. And, I think I learned a lot about, what it takes to be a successful company. And, it's not just important of, building something well, but really making sure you're building the right thing, and that you're checking in with the market to make sure that you're getting early feedback. But I overcompensated and went big. I went from like a 60-person company to a 60,000-person company, Oracle, which I don't recommend to anyone to overcompensate that strongly. It was interesting to see an enterprise company that was as successful as Oracle. And so like I tried to take what, there are amazing people there. They've really had a big influence in the industry, but they weren't a growth company and they weren't a fast moving company. And I really missed that. And so I was looking at moving into management at Oracle, and a friend of mine said, hey, there's this position opening up at Yahoo. And I interviewed for both the engineering management position as well as a engineering lead position. They offered me my choice, and I decided to try management and didn't look back. Yahoo was at the peak of, at the time they were the #1 trafficked site on the internet, which is hard to believe now that they don't exist. Yeah. And so, it was just a really interesting time where they were still the underdog, and, just really smart, humble, engineers that were, loved sharing knowledge with each other. So met a lot of great people, learned a lot there. But at some point realized that this was not the growth company it was anymore. And I went to Salesforce, where I really grew my leadership and executive roles. Stayed for 7 years there. Just Mark Benioff is amazing. Leader that I learned a lot from. And then the last 4 years I was at Stitch Fix as CTO, starting, as you mentioned, a year before the IPO, really scaling out the team, the product, the technology stack, and just amazing company that I think is going to continue to go far.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through your story. I'm actually curious, as you've moved up kind of and got higher titles and more managerial roles, like, were you still actively involved in the code base, and like how much were you coding day to day, if at all?
Yeah.
Curious games throughout the years.
I have not done much coding, and it was interesting. My first role as engineering manager, the former engineering manager was still at Yahoo, and so she trained me into the new role. And one of the things that she had said was like, I wish that I wouldn't have been as hands-on in the code, because every time a team is slipping on a date or, struggling with something, I will jump in and fix bugs or, help with the solution, and we're not getting out of that problem. So like what I probably should be doing is hiring this open role that I have so that we don't get into the same challenge that we're always having. And so I really took that to heart of like, making sure that I stayed connected enough to the technology and, could understand that we were making the right trade-offs, understand how the system worked. But if I'm jumping in to heroically save the day, I'm not actually working on the fundamental issues that are going to help the team be successful in the long run. And so that has really influenced like how I spend my time and how I look at the role.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing. Kind of on that note, like, what's the biggest challenge you faced as a technology leader?
It's interesting. The technology challenges are fun, but the people issues are harder. And so I'd say that I joke often that I would have been better off being a psychology major than a computer science major. And, just dealing with people at, in some of these large organizations is much more complex and not deterministic in any way. And you never know if you're doing it the right way or not. But, I think that I've spent more sleepless nights thinking about people issues than I have about technology issues. I've had my fair share of critical production issues, and and those are sleepless nights, but I've had a lot fewer of them. And in some ways, they can really pull a team together, where you really see what a team is made out of how they respond to a production issue or, a potential security issue or, performance problems or whatever it might be. You really oftentimes get so connected with people and seeing, more often than not, people really rise to the occasion, and you feel like, you can, count on them for anything after overcoming one of those issues. And I'd say that what I feel really grateful though is all the companies I've been in, we've treated every single production incident as a learning opportunity. And I'm a big fan of blameless postmortems, which means that we get in a room and we do a postmortem of what happens, but the only rule is you can't point fingers at anyone. So you don't name any names. You're not trying to get anyone in trouble, but it is all about learning. And if you can really approach any problem with that open mindset and learning, then you will make sure that you uncover all the problems in the areas and you won't have the same problems again. Because the whole purpose is if you are going to ship software, you're going to break something eventually. And that's a given. It's how do you make sure you don't have that same problem happen again? And how do you make sure that you learn from it and you get better and you have other people around you learn from it so they don't have the same mistake that you had.
I think that first part of your answer actually about the people side of things is really interesting. I actually was talking to a startup founder and, we were talking about his role and what he does day to day. And he's like, you'd actually be surprised. A big part of my job is honestly being a part-time therapist. My employees come to me with problems I never expected them to come to me with. It's I feel great that they feel comfortable, but it's now I'm kind of in this position. Right. I wasn't ready for this. So it's interesting to hear kind of you've had similar experiences, but moving on now kind of more towards your time at Stitch Fix, I'm curious, what's the one thing you're most proud of accomplishing?
I'd say I'm really proud of how much we shipped in the time that I was there. So when I started, the business was a women's only business. And we launched a men's business. We launched a business for kids. We did a marketplace for people to shop with a cart. And we launched internationally. And, we really just had an architecture that made it really easy for us to do incremental shipping of different software components. And so I just, we had to make some technology, changes while we did it. We had to scale the team while we were doing it, but we never slowed down the pace of delivery. And so just looking back at where the company is today versus where I started, I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud of the people. I just feel really, so fortunate for the people that I got to work with. And, I just was texting one that's still there and, really have strong, friendships and connections that I'm really proud of.
Awesome. I have to ask this. So as you guys are testing stuff at Stitch Fix, would you ever use yourself as a use case and order something through Stitch Fix and kind of?
Oh yeah. All the time. Yes. And it is really fun to work for a company that you can be the user. Yeah. Even at Salesforce working on enterprise software, we use the software to run all of our internal systems. And so that was really fun to be able to use the things you're building every day. And Stitch Fix even more so. I am wearing a Stitch Fix shirt today. I get more boxes and packages than my husband would really like me to get, but it is great. And Stitch Fix is a culture where we test everything. So everything is A/B tests where we have multiple versions of the software running, and we'll put people in different population groups and see not just how things operate on a single day, but over time of what's not just the first order effect, but the second or third order effect to the user population, and which we call clients. And so that is always really fun of like, just I think as I was leaving, one of my VP engineering, so it's like, I know Cathy will continue to text me with feedback on, whatever launches comes next. And, just like, I love that aspect of what we were doing.
That's awesome. I know you mentioned kind of you missed what you miss most is the people there. And kind of on that line of thinking, without naming names, like who are the best and worst hires you made and why?
I'd say anytime you can hire someone smarter than you, and a lot of people have a hard time doing that. They think, oh, they have more experience or they're smarter than I am. Like, what am I needed for? And you will never, ever fail if you are hiring people that are smarter than you and know more than you. And so one of my recent hires, it's not too recent, but brought in a new leader over IT, which I really struggled because there was a other leader there who really wanted this role and wanted to grow. But, I was just as someone who's never managed IT before, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, we really hired in a senior leader to come in, and it was night and day. When I hired someone who had just way more experience than I did leading that organization, and just feel so fortunate that I got to work with him, and I learned a lot from this person, and just had a great working relationship with them. I'd say one of the challenging hires that I've had in my career was not someone who worked directly for me, but was one level down, and was a referral from someone in the organization. And we did a rush job hiring, and kind of leaned on the referral, but really did not show up living the values that we had as a company. And it was and no one shared that information with their manager or me right away, but we started to see some things that didn't show up the way that we would expect someone of their level. And I think that when we did a kind of a debrief on what had happened here, we realized that we hadn't done reference checks, and we hadn't really done a full check on, is this person, kind of a good fit to the values that we had. And so I'd say it was, a pretty big miss that we hadn't followed the kind of structure of what we had set out to do, and really, caused a lot of friction across the team because of it.
Got it. On the hiring process front, I'm curious if, any of the companies you've worked at in the past, one of them stands out as running a really great process, or if it's all kind of the same in big tech. And if so, is there any specific part of the process you think, one company did really well, and would love for you to point that out?
Yeah. I'd say that I've learned a lot about hiring. A lot of things I did early days are not necessarily the things that I would recommend doing today. I love whiteboard thinking, and I'm actually really good at those problem solving, gotcha questions. But they don't really tell you how good someone is going to do at their job. And so, I was someone who used those way longer than I think I should have. And I think that Google has done a really good job of really doing more science around what makes a good hire, and how do you evaluate folks. I'd say that take home interview questions and pair programming interview questions, I think are a really good way of seeing what people are going to do in their day-to-day job. You don't work by yourself, you work in a team. And so seeing how people work with team is good. Not my company, but I heard another company always does 2 pair programming exercises, because they say you can flub a pair programming exercise, but you can't fake it. Like if you're, you can't by accident have a good pair programming exercise. And so I like that. I think that, it's easy to miss someone that's really good, and it's easy to have a bad interview. I'd say even at Amazon early days, Amazon would rather hire someone that was had a couple of amazing interviews and a couple of bad interviews than someone who was kind of like mediocre across the board. And so they wanted to see someone who like really excelled in a specific area, even if it meant they had holes in other areas. And like, I like that sense of like playing to someone's strengths, and, you can, especially as a larger company, you can take more liberties in that way. It's harder in an early stage company. You actually need more generalists and people who can both interview other people and, handle operations and write the first product and talk with customers. And so I think that it changes in your stage of company what you look for. But I'd say that's really important. And then the thing there's 2 other things I say. One is I have worked at a lot of companies that focus on hiring within your network and like touting the great track record they have for internal referrals. And as a woman engineer, I think that's really dangerous. I think that, you have only a specific network of people. And, if you continue to hire people in your network, you're only going to see people who look exactly like you, and you're not going to push yourself and get diverse opinions around the table. And so you'd be better off of like really trying to extend outside your network and finding people who are going to push you and bring different experiences to the table than you have in your own. And so that's something that we were really intentional at Stitch Fix, of making sure that we were reaching out into diverse networks and seeing people that, were different than the people that we already had. And then the final thing at Stitch Fix was really unique is we had a product interview for every engineer, and we had them interview with a non-technical person to partner on a problem. And it's really important for technical people to be able to talk with non-technical folks. And we found that this enabled us to, it was a much higher EQ team than any team that I've worked with, because these were people who not just wanted to code something to spec, but really have value. And sometimes, we would always ask, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And sometimes it's like not writing any code will solve the problem. And you want someone who's going to ask those questions of like, you say you want a red button, but that's not actually what I think, will add the most value here. And, what I hear you saying is actually you need, this thing over here. And so you want to hire people who will ask those critical questions and be curious and really engaged in a different way.
That's amazing. I really appreciate you going into such detail on that answer. I do a lot of hiring at Pair and work with our startups on early stage hiring, and it's really hard. So all the tips and knowledge are helpful. So thank you. Kind of on one of the points you touched on, want to dive a little bit deeper there. So how do you feel Stitch Fix has done in terms of promoting diversity in tech? And what has your experience been like as a woman in tech?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over my tenure. I've been used to being the only woman in the room, the only woman on a team. And I'd say that I have had a great experience. I've had amazing managers and bosses that have been men who have really supported me and mentored me and sponsored me throughout my career. And so, to me, I really care about helping do the same for other women or underrepresented minorities in tech. I think we don't have enough software engineers and technologists to fill the demand in the country, and we would be better off if we created a more inclusive environment for people to look different. And I think the stereotypes have changed. Like, people are realizing, this isn't a position where people are holed up in like a cube and, you have social people or awkward people who are, writing software. It's really a collaborative environment, and you work in teams, and you need people who, can both bring the technology, but also have more EQ to collaborate and work together. And so I think having different personalities and people who understand your customers in a different way is really important. And you get that through hiring diverse people. At Stitch Fix, it's a very female heavy company. 80% of the company, like more than 80% are women, female CEO and founder, just walking around like the halls, it's like all women. But when I came in, women were not well represented within engineering. I think it was higher than most, but still under 30%. And all of my directs were men, white men. And yet they really cared about diversity. They came to a place like Stitch Fix because they were interested in the technology and the business, and we're really proud of working for a company founded by an amazing young female entrepreneur. And so we talked a lot about how do we have a more diverse pipeline? How can we have a more diverse and inclusive hiring process? And it's little things that you can do of making sure that you have inclusive language in your job description. To avoid kind of bro type of language that turns different people off. It's even important to have fewer requirements listed because you can write a job description with 100 items of wish list of things that you want, and you might not even care about all of them, but you're like, this would be the ideal person, but I'm willing if they have half of the things on this list. A lot of men will look at that and they'll say okay, I've got half of these things, I'll apply. And a lot of women are like, oh, I couldn't possibly apply to this job because I don't have nearly enough of the requirements on this list. And so just knowing that you're gonna rule out certain populations who may look at the same job description with a different lens changes the type of people who interview for the position. And so that was important for us to do. And then, I'd say that I spent a lot of time early on hiring to sit in on every debrief. And so I didn't necessarily meet every candidate, but I listened into the discussion that we talked about candidates. And I'd say that there were some times where someone would explain the interview and then have a strong assessment on whether we should hire the person or not. And I would listen to exactly their rationale, but not agree with the outcome based on their assessment. And so we could talk about that and dig in. And sometimes it was just the way they articulated it, or sometimes there was some things that I could share or the other directors could share that was kind of changed the way that they thought about the interview, and everybody in the room could hear that too. And so, it just could be as much of hey, they weren't there very confident in, their skills. And you're like, well, why did you think that? And, it just could be a passive word choice that they use that, someone's like, well, no, they're actually really confident over here. And, is that really a job requirement that you need? And so I think that types of thing really helped to make sure that we were changing the dynamic. In my 4 years, we went to really significantly increasing both people of color as well as women on the team. So I had close to 40% women on my team, which is unheard of in Silicon Valley. The last year that I was there, 50% of our hires were people of color. Just I think it showed in, the team was, just richer for it. And, I think that it helped in the products that we built.
Thank you for sharing those personal experiences. I've actually been having a lot more conversations about this with founders, which I think is great. And one thing I always try to advise is it's not just enough to make the hire. Once you make the hire, it's now there has to be an inclusive environment and you have to retain.
Yeah.
No one wants to be kind of the token anything. So make sure you're kind of providing an inclusive environment. So
absolutely. And it takes two. I mean, we talk about that a lot, diversity and inclusion. You can't have inclusion without having diversity. But diversity is not enough if you're not really being inclusive.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And then I know recently it's been a 4-year journey that kind of culminated at Stitch Fix. I'm curious to hear kind of how you're thinking about what's next.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of body, mind, soul searching right now. When I am at a company, I am like heads down, really focused 100% on what I'm doing. And, I really wanted to take some time after Stitch Fix to see what was going on, because I feel like I haven't had a good feel for what's going on in the industry. I'm a little bit of a quarantine cliche right now. I got a Peloton, which I've been doing every day, and been really enjoying the interface. And, it's kind of making me think a lot about product design. I've also been baking a lot of bread. And my kids are doing online school right now. And so it's nice to be able to spend some time with them. But I'm also starting to talk to a lot of companies. I've been talking to some venture firms. I've been talking to some early stage startup founders. And it's been really interesting. Like, there's so many interesting things out there. And so I really want to take my time to have this exploration and just have some time for myself and my family before I jump into something new.
Absolutely. Well, whoever gets you next is going to be very looking forward to seeing what happens. Kind of on the flip side of that, if you could go back in time and we're just out of college, how would you, if at all, approach your career differently?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do anything different. I'd say that a lot of people say like, well, how did you get to CTO? And it's like, I wasn't ever thinking about CTO when I was, just right out of school. And I think, what I hear people say is a career is made in hindsight, not, while you're on that path. And, while you're on it, it might not feel like straight, but you can kind of in retrospect see this arc of where you've come from. And I'd say I have a little bit more of a clearer arc than most, from engineer to engineering manager to CTO. But I know many other people who have had different paths that have gotten there, or to some other destination that they've been really excited about. And so I'd say that the things that I would always recommend are to take the roles where you're going to learn the most. Follow your passions and not worry about where you're going to be 10 years from now, but kind of like have an idea of what you want to do next. And if you don't know, talk to a lot of people. And the thing that has really helped me the most is early career advice I was told is like, if you are interested in something that's different than what you're doing today, just tell people that. People will see you differently and think of you when opportunities arise when you tell people what you're passionate about. I've heard people like, well, I'm not, this position's opening up, but I'm not going to tell someone I'm interested in it. Like my boss will think of me anyway. And a lot of time your boss has no idea you're interested in that thing. And if you tell them, they will think of you and consider you for that opportunity. Or if you're not ready for it, they'll tell you why and help you, get there for the next time.
Got it. One last kind of career advice question before we transition to Q&A from the audience. But I'm curious for the engineers in the audience right now, either considering joining a big tech company, working for a startup, or starting their own company. Any advice on which way to go or how you would think about it?
I think there's no wrong answer. That I enjoyed going from a big tech company at Amazon, which is still not as big as it is today, to an early stage company. And, I'd say working at Amazon, I got to learn from the tech giants around me. And, I just learned more about the rigor of shipping things at scale and, like thinking everything from interview process to database schema design to hardware constraints and, automation and testing. When I went to this early stage company, like with less than 2 years experience. Like I was like, oh, I can't believe we don't have a automation suite here. And I can't believe we don't have this, other thing here. And, but I wrote way more code there than any other place. And I got to wear more hats, and I got to like go to, a pilot customer and, be involved when we were doing discussions about name changes and logos. And, you got to interact with people that weren't just engineers, and be much more involved in the company in a different scale than you would have. And so I think it was great for me to do both, of like seeing the big companies and little companies. I've never been a founder. I tried to do a little stint, and it's hard. And I think that sometimes it may be easier earlier in your career because you don't know what you don't know. And I was a swimmer in college, and I made it to nationals my freshman year. And, it was my best season at conference championships. And my swim coach said, it's like, oh yeah, like I love coaching freshmen because they don't get nervous in the same way, because they don't like have any expectations. And then like by the time that you get past that freshman year, you have like expectations that you want to meet. And like, that was my best year, as well as several other freshmen that I swam with. And I think that entrepreneurship is a little bit the same way, is you have to have a thick skin, and like, really, people are going to poke holes at what you're doing and say like other people are doing that. And you have to have real conviction for it. And it's a little bit easier, earlier stage to do that and have that conviction when almost you don't know better because there's just so much possibility out there, and you need to block out that noise and just be really passionate and excited about what you're doing, and not let them get you down. And so like, it's a little bit harder, the family and other, constraints on you to be as bold to be an entrepreneur. And so I don't know, I would imagine to like, if you're interested in doing it early is probably a great idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we think of ourselves as the 0 to 1 fund, and like we really like getting our hands dirty with entrepreneurs early on. But from an entrepreneur's perspective, like they want to get out of that stage as quickly as possible and like grow the company. So it's super funny, kind of the interesting dynamics there. But jumping into Q&A, actually the first question I'm going to actually take from Mar Hershenson, who's one of the founding partners at Pair. And she said a good question to ask you was about AWS. She said it was there. You were there when it started and had a funny story about it. So curious if that's fair game to share, or if you know what she's talking about.
I don't know what she's talking about, actually. So no, I was not there when AWS started. So, I'd say that I was there like when it was just still scaling out different product launches. And I'd say that I don't know that any of us anticipated AWS coming when I was there. It's pretty amazing that they were able to expand what they were doing in such a unique way. I'm going to have to ask their Mara what story that she's thinking about. I may have said something from a friend that I still have there.
All good. All right. So I see 5 questions here, so we can go through them and feel free to take the ones you want. But the first one is, how did your experience at Amazon inform various decisions you've made as CTO of Stitch Fix?
Yeah. I'd say that starting at Amazon and then spending 7 years at Stitch Fix, like I really appreciated growth companies and growth mindsets in leaders. Jeff was not satisfied with just being a book color. He never wanted to be written in an article and have Amazon in the same sentence with any other early stage .com company. Like he only wanted to see himself in with the giant companies that were out there. And so I'd say that like I was much more of a voice of growth and opportunity as a leader of CTO, as a CTO at Stitch Fix, and the sense of like, okay, like how can we invest more and how can we grow more, and And, at Stitch Fix was interesting because Stitch Fix did not have an easy ride to getting funding. Really had to get to profitability a lot faster than many companies of its success and stage. So I learned a lot from Stitch Fix about how to really run efficient and business and to get to profitability. But I'd say that I still leaned more growthy and do we need to make as much of a profit right now? That can always come, but let's make sure that we're still focusing on growth.
Awesome. Thanks for taking that question. The next one I see is, what advice would you give software engineers to climb the career ladder? So I know you talked a little bit about your career. What advice would you give others who are kind of just thinking, how do I get to the top as fast as possible?
I'd say there's a few things. I mean, one is take the roles that you're going to learn the most from. Take the roles in the teams and the managers who are going to invest the most in you. So if you have 2 opportunities with managers, figure out the one that the manager is really a fan you feel like is really going to invest time and be a sponsor for you. And then I'd say really have a beginner's mind in everything you're doing. Ask a lot of questions, and I feel like I've learned there's always something you can learn from someone else, and so really find that thing that you can learn from and teach, and it's technology field is always changing and always growing, and so it's just being really open to change, and learning is something that is really important for career growth.
Got it. On the flip side of the career climber, now we got a question from someone who wants to be a first-time kind of technical founder, CTO. Do you have any advice for them if they're kind of early on in their career, or maybe have a few years of software engineering experience and then dive right into co-founder and CTO?
Yeah. That's a good question. It's interesting. My husband is also a CTO, and he loves early stage companies. And so more of my knowledge of this is secondhand through him. But, it's funny, we talk tech at the dinner table. Our kids, will probably decide not to be software engineers. It's, I'd say what he's seen is that he will have to wear different hats at different stages. And he's very flexible at, hey, right now, we just need to get V1 product. And so I'm going to be heads down just writing code. And he still loves that. And he would never be in a role, I think, where he wouldn't get to still stay hands-on, because it is just such a passion of his. But he can go for months where he doesn't write code and realize okay, right now I just need to manage the team and I need to focus on hiring. And so just that flexibility of being able to stay close enough that you can, be technical, but then also understand okay, this week I just, I'm actually going to unplug from writing code and, really get this next hire done, or, build out some demos for, the sales team as they're doing some pitches. And so I think it can be thrilling and challenging at the same time, is that every week can feel different, and there's a lot of different demands that are coming your way. But I think that for certain people, that's part of the charm, and that you never get bored.
Well, yeah, if your husband's ever thinking of making a change to another startup, I know a few. So just, what do you think is the hardest part of building a great engineering team that scales with your business?
I'd say, I think that what I mentioned earlier is that, if you think about a pie of all the skills that you need that are both people-oriented, product-oriented, technology-oriented, as you're thinking about early stage and you have funding for 3 hires, you're going to need to hire some real generalists who like to build things, who can also answer phones and do hiring and, operations and the like. And so, just really thinking about those first hires as like generalists and who are interested in getting to work on, wear a lot of different hats is important. It's kind of fun for the people who do it, like, just to really get to build things from the early stage. And then I think that you have to think about how you scale it, because at some point those people are probably not going to be happy, after you get to a team of 100, where they have to actually, they're not the best at any of those things. They're, either they scale and they still know everything and are just this like amazing, person that can just jump in anywhere and just add value, or they get really dissatisfied that they can't really play the same role that they had before. And so as you're scaling things out, you're hiring more like narrow generalists of like, hey, we really need someone who understands AWS deployments, or we need someone who really understands, like this mobile technology stack, or whatever it might be. And so I think that that's the interesting thing, is like, if you're really thinking about building and scaling, with the business, as the business scales, like you have to think like really about what stage you're in, and know that what worked before is not going to be the thing that's going to be successful after you get to 50 or you get to 100.
Makes sense. One last question, then we'll let everyone get to dinner or maybe their next Zoom meeting. But the final question is, what kinds of internal tools did your engineering teams build out to support your operations teams, such as business operations and customer success at Stitch Fix?
Yeah, so Stitch Fix, from a technology standpoint, grew up on Heroku, which is a platform for doing deployments, and really first 7 years, scaled out all of the technology on it, and it was like made it really simple from an infrastructure standpoint. Never really had a knock. Like everybody was really in control of their own deployments, and so we built out our own pipeline when we moved to AWS, and really tried to keep teams pretty autonomous for managing their systems and doing independent deployments. We had a lot of software that was used by internal teams. So we had 6 fulfillment centers around the country, where we were shipping physical clothing. And all of the technology that we built was homegrown. And so there was a lot of like internal tools that we used to like have insights into where the bottlenecks were, what problems were happening, and managing all those systems. And then customer support, we use Zendesk for our support systems, but then built a lot of ad hoc tools that went together. And so, operations was, meant a lot of different things for us at Stitch Fix. There was the operations of our physical warehouses, and then the client success team for customer support. But it was, in some ways, it made the engineers really connected to other parts of the business because they were building internal tools for a lot of these different systems.
Amazing. Well, Cathy, I learned a ton, and I'm sure everyone in the audience did as well. So big, heartfelt thank you from the Pair team for doing this, and really, really appreciate it.
Great to be here, and excited to see the next cohort of the Garage.
Amazing. Yeah. Anyone, if you have questions for Pair Garage, feel free to reach out to me at harris@pair.vc. And thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.